today, what we're going to do is we're going to do our, assignment part 2, okay? So I'm sure from 5ICW, you remember there was a golden master methodology. And it's something that we're going to, hopefully you're going to keep it, or keep on using it, should I say, for your future studies as well. So because if you go do, I think you're doing the CMDB subject with KT, is that correct? He'll be asking you to build some servers. Man, what? Use the same golden master, build his servers. Okay, in next semester you'll be doing ECS again. You're gonna be doing 5ISV again, which all require Server 2016 as the operating system. And you know what? Once you've created this golden master, obviously we got a bit of limitation because we're using the evaluation copy, and that's 180 days. But let's say that you build it for this semester, at least you can use it for all your subjects in the same go. Yeah, I just don't want to take that risk. Just imagine you're on the last day of actually getting your assignments checked off, and then it all stops working because of that. And what? I can't pass you. And at the same time, it seems unfair for you not to pass, right? So let's go back to have a look at this assignment part 2, okay? So assignment part 2 is here. It's part of the assignment initiation. Oops, did I click on the wrong thing? Yeah, okay. That's the one. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so let me just paint you the picture. If you remember from 5ICW, you built this network, you created an Active Directory, you created a file server, you created a few other servers, okay? So the main things, we're not going to worry about the WSUS, we're not going to worry about the DHCP server because you've done it once. There's no, in this one, we want to move on to some of the other services. So at the end of the day, this is what you should have. Okay, this is what you should have. What is that? Basically, if you remember, at the end of the 5ICW, you sort of ended up with this a domain controller, file server, and a few other services, like I said. But like I said, we're going to concentrate on this part of it. But we also gave you sort of almost a prelude to what's going to happen in the future. Because if you remember, we talked about the second site being Elizabeth, being the production site. But really, at that point in time, this company wasn't ready to do everything yet. Okay, they just wanted to start off with this and see how it goes. And now 2 years down the track, they've got you back because they were so happy with your work. And now they want you to extend the network to incorporate the Elizabeth downside. So if you look at what you end up with read-write domain controller, so RWDC at the Adelaide site. But at the Elizabeth site, you end up with a RODC. So if you remember from last lesson, that's a read-only domain controller. Reason for that is this site is less secure. This is a production site. People walk in and out. They need authentication, but they don't really need all the bells and whistles that goes with a read-write domain controller. So all they need is a read-only domain controller. But also, the problem is that there's files that they need still to access here, like recipes, like manifests and all other things. But the file server is here at Adelaide. So we need a file server here at the local site. But we don't want them to have different files. There's no point having different files, is there? If it's the same file system, it should be the same file system regardless of which site you go to. But we don't want them to take those files or transfer those files over the internet every time they need it, every time they need to work on it. So basically, we need a file server at their local location, but we want it to be the same content on both sites. So that suggests replication or synchronization. But obviously, if we've got two sites, how do we actually connect to each other? Obviously, we could just go out and get a lease line. I think for the 4 CRS subject, you would have investigated that. And that's a pretty expensive exercise, especially if the actual amount of data we're suggesting is actually not very high. Once you get that initial replication done, it's going to be very light traffic. So what your network designer or network architect has come up with is that they just need to use their existing NBN connection, use their existing internet connection, which is NBN, which is relatively cheap, and they're going to use a technology called VPN to connect the two sites, which is a feature of Server 2016. luckily enough. But not necessarily the best VPN, but it's actually there. It's something that's already part of the operating system. No need to pay for anything else. So then you have these servers. Then we call them RAS, remote access servers. So it serves two functionality. One is to have the site-to-site connection. Another one is to give people who are off-site, at home, on the road, on a customer site, the ability to use whatever internet connection they have. It might be 4G, 5G, whatever, and access or connect up to the office and access their files and resources like as if they're there. All right, so that is the big picture stuff. That's what we will end up with. So how do we get there? So today you'll see that we have these two sites, and obviously in our prac we're not going to have physical sites. We're going to have we don't actually own two physical sites like that, and we don't own these NBN connections for you guys all to use differently. What we instead have is virtualization, and we all know about that. And what we're going to do is we're going to, if you notice, this is like one internal network, isn't it? This is another internal network. So what we're going to say is this is VMnet 1, and we're going to call this VMnet 2. Okay, if you forgot from your full IVM, they're basically two different internal networks, which are disconnected from each other. Then we have this internet. For us in this room, the internet is the physical network. So therefore, if you notice, this this Adelaide RAS will have an inside and an outside. Two network cards, exactly right. Inside network card being on VMnet 1, outside network card being on bridged. Get me? Bridged is the physical network or the internet effectively for our design. Same with this one. VMnet 2 on the inside, bridged on the outside. You get me? It spans inside, outside. So this is a table. You've seen this one before, but instead of having one, you have two, one for each side. Yeah. Oh, sometimes. At some points in time, yes, definitely. At certain points in time, you'll need to do the DFS, which we'll talk about later, which is the process of actually synchronizing the service that synchronizes files here to here. And obviously, in order to do that, you need to have Active Directory. In order to do that, you must have an active VPN connection. So yes, all 6 virtual machines on at the same time, hence the solid-state hard drives. Okay? Yep. No, because the firewall exists on your virtual machine. We're not using the physical computers to do anything. Yeah, we are using the NIC. The firewall is not on the NIC. It's in the operating system. Okay? Okay, so we're getting back to our table. So obviously there's 2 sites, so 2 subnets. So everyone here should understand the term subnets. And obviously there's /24, very easy, but the third octet is XX or YY. And I'll be giving you numbers today, 2 different numbers. And obviously we need to make sure that everyone's different for a couple of reasons. Authenticity, because it's your work, not your friends. And obviously this has gone over. And your DNS domain name is EC underscore your surname, not your friends. Okay, your surname. And basically, the first thing you have to do is a deployment plan. You've seen this one before as well, okay? And nothing different. It's not just like we do it once and we totally forget about it again. It's like one of those things. It's good for planning, okay? It's all about what are the major tasks, okay? I'm sure there's a few more now. How long do you think it's going to take you to complete? You don't have to fill in this table straight away before you do it, to be honest. Because you won't be able to do this whole assignment today, for example. If you could, you wouldn't need to do this subject. So what is hoped is that we're going to learn about the various things as we go along, and you'll be doing it in class, in the worksheets as practice, and then doing it in this assignment so to have a sort of a more realistic application of what you've learned. And as you're doing this, fill this out. How long you think it's going to take, when you're going to do it. Okay, work must start for 3 weeks from now. Okay, so this is the plan starting 3 weeks from now. How long is there going to be any downtime? How long, if the downtime is, and what shall we do in that? What are the contingencies or alternatives? Let's say the file server is going to be off for 1 hour. What do you suggest the users do? Do they just do no work? Or do you have any suggestions? Maybe saving it to a local storage, then putting on the file server when it comes back online. Maybe that's a contingency. So that's what we're talking about here, okay? What is their plan? You can't just say you go home and get paid for it and not do any work, okay? It might be that. Sometimes it might be that. And if it is that the whole thing is offline, maybe that's a good time for the company to do some team building or training. For example, OHS training somewhere else, or planning day somewhere else. But obviously have something in mind. So with this, arrange for a meeting to liaise with your stakeholder. Guess what? Your lecturer, me, is your stakeholder. And I'll be role-playing that. Briefly discuss your deployment plan. We've done this before, I think. Just talking about what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, how long, all that kind of stuff. Negotiate access times, just like what I said before. If you need to go and do something for someone, you can't just turn up on the day and expect them to be, oh, okay, no worries, go do it. You have to organize ahead of schedule. And if you tell me a time and it turns out that that's a really bad time for my industry or my company, we can negotiate a time. Okay? So all that is part of communications, isn't it? Okay, clarify any requirements. So obviously, hey, do you just turn up and that's it? Maybe you might not even be allowed on this Elizabeth production site if you just turn up with sandals. Because don't forget, this is a production site. It's got forklifts, it's got pallets, it's got all sorts of things happening on the floor. If you turn up with sandals, you might be asked to leave. So what you do is you have to clarify any requirements for going there. Okay, it's a food production site, isn't it? Is there something to do with cleanliness, food hygiene, WHS codes, standards, or security clearance you might need to obtain? And to be honest, you don't have to find that out by doing research. You just ask, don't you? You just ask. If I'm going to your house or your business, if there's any requirements like you have to wear steel cap shoes or enclosed shoes, or you have to have a hard hat or noise protection, then you expected them to be able to tell you, won't you? All you have to do is ask. You're not asking anymore. Don't make this any harder than it should be or can be. Just we're trying to keep it as easy as possible, this part, because we know that no one really likes doing that part. But just ask at the minimum. This can be done via in person or by telecommunications technology such as Skype for Business. Okay, so we don't have to do it in person in class, but we have to do it sometime. Okay, and I will record you. Okay, like we've been doing all the time. Then there's server configuration. Okay, so basically, if we look at this, there's a couple of websites I've given you. Okay, they're basically, it's what's called best practices. So we've been doing things, not necessarily best practice. We've just been doing things because we've been learning it. Okay, so this site has a couple of some best practice things for setting up Active Directory domain controller. The aim is not to make sure that you're doing everything exactly like that, because there's so many things that we have to check off. Then is to make sure you know about it. So with this, go find 5 ones that you can easily do. Don't pick the hardest one. I'm not suggesting you pick the hardest one. Pick the easiest one. Pick the one that you can do in your situation, and just implement it. And briefly explain reasons why you picked those and what they do. Okay. So then we're going to talk about the Golden Master. That's one of our IT Works best practices, or our methodologies or policies, should we say. That if you work for IT Works and we're going to build virtual machines for our clients, we're going to use what's a technique called Golden Master. Okay, if you don't know what Golden Master is, it's effectively a template virtual machine. If you were working with Hyper-V or ESXi vSphere, there would be actually called template objects you can create in those technologies. However, we're using VMware Workstation. There is no such thing as templates in this current version. It used to be ages ago, not now. So instead of actually creating a template object, which is basically a virtual machine turned into a template anyway, we're going to actually just create a virtual machine called the Golden Master and use it as our template. Describe the technique. Okay. List the advantages of using this technique. Okay, it should be pretty easy with some advantages. And then we create the virtual machines. Okay, there's going to be a domain controller, file server. You can see there's some basic hardware requirements. We're not looking for RAID. not looking for span volumes or anything like that because we've done it in the previous subject, right? Not to say that in real life you wouldn't do that anyway, but just for this assignment, we're not going to mark it. Okay, so just in that case, just don't need to do it. Well, you won't be wrong if you do it. You just won't get any benefit from doing it. We will have a remote access server and a Windows 10 client, and you'll see that the Elizabeth Downs, if you look at the diagram, is basically a mirror image, except for the obviously ones that read-only domain controller and the IP addressing system. Okay. And if you look at this Active Directory structure, it's exactly the same as ICW. If we scroll right down to the bottom with the Appendix A, all the users, exactly the same as before. Okay, no one has changed, nothing has changed. If we go back to where we were, and if we look at the sharing of the folders, except for reducing the number of folders you had to do from a file by CW just to the workgroup folder and EC documents, there's no difference with the permissions. So that's basically saying that all of that so far, what we've talked about so far, building the golden master, building these servers and the file server and the user accounts and groups and AGDLP and permissions, it's something that we expect you to know from 5xCW still. AGDLP, if I didn't say that already, AGDLP is definitely going to be checked again. You need to make sure you're doing it correctly still. And printer, same with the printer, no need for a brand new, the printer pools and whatnot, because we've done that before. This is just a simple printer that we're going to use just as another resource. Then we get into the new stuff. All that stuff so far is being just stuff from 5ICW. Okay, the new stuff, password policy. We learned that last lesson. Okay, you can see there's a general password policy for everyone in the domain. So obviously, I would expect you to finish that worksheet before you can do this. Then there's a manager's policy, which is specific for manager users. Okay, which is a little bit more stricter. But we also learned from last lesson that there was a fine-grained password policy, wasn't there? Next lesson, we'll be covering group policies. And we will be using group policies to configure the computers in a certain way. So we're going to set a background image, just like the computers in front of you. You notice every one of them has the same background image? You reckon someone sat there and just configured it? No. Okay, absolutely not. You're going to map a L drive and a W drive. Okay, L drive is EC documents, that's easy enough. But W drive is a little bit different because every work group, if you know, there's production, research and development, they have a different W drive, don't they? So we're going to use filtering to actually specify which user gets which share as their W drive, you get me? So we're going to build some little bit more intelligence in our drive mappings, not just manual drive mappings at all. It's going to be automatic through group policies. And after you've done the DFS, these drives will use the DFS namespace rather than just the simple share path that we were using from ICW. Automatically connect to that printer, again, through group policy. Configure loopback processing, and when we cover that, you'll understand what that means. Automatically deploy Firefox, but only to Windows 10 computers. You get me? So we're going to use group policies to deploy a piece of software and check if it's Windows 10 or not before we actually install it. And then configure Internet Explorer so that this is your home page. Again, through group policy. There's a whole heap more you can do, and next lesson we'll learn a little bit more about it. But that's what we're talking about. Next thing is the asset register. Okay, so basically, if you look at the computers in front of you, they're all assets of TFSA. You'll notice there's a white sticker on there, and there's an asset number. And basically, somewhere in a database, if you plug that asset number in, you'll tell you all about this computer, where it's allocated, what hardware it has, what operating system it has, and what room it belongs to. Well, that's good because now if I log a job and log it against an asset, I can build a history of this asset. If it's constantly having a network issue or network card issue, maybe it's a faulty network card. Maybe we replace that. If we keep track of when this was purchased, and we can actually do a query from this database and find out exactly when they should be replaced. Or we could have a location where all the drivers for this piece of hardware is located, because it's it's got a specific asset. So what you need to do is you need to not create a database. That's a bit too hard beyond the scope. What you have to do is just use Excel, create a table. What kind of information you should have. Okay, at a minimum, you should have a thing that's unique. Like, for example, this asset tag has a unique asset ID. Okay, it has to be unique, just like you should in IDs. So that's in a database, that's called a primary key. Okay, so you have to have something that identifies this asset. Then what kind of things would be good to keep track of this asset? Maybe the hardware, CPU, amount of memory, hard drive, network cards, etc. Data purchase, warranty. Just think of it. Just think of what kind of information you'd like to know. Create a table, and what you need to do is just go back to the picture up here and see if you can just populate the information with these virtual machines, okay? Pretending they're like real physical machines, okay? So it's not meant to be hard. It's just meant to address one of the requirements is that you create a asset register. Okay, but what about this? Whoa, there's a couple of bits of software, okay? So these software are actually named in the competency, so which means that you must use them. There's MS Info. So what's MS Info? This is MS Info. If you notice, MS Info or this system info gives you all the information. Well, if you're initially creating the asset register, wouldn't it just be good to get a whole heap of information out of it, right? And you'll see there's Microsoft Inventory Analyzer, Easy Audit, or something you find yourself, okay? But just have a go at using these, okay? Not saying you got to become experts, but just at least use it, run it, see how it works. Just give a brief description of what they do, what it does well in your opinion, what it does poorly, and would you recommend it for this organization, yes or no? So one of the things is that, just to let me give you a tip, the MS Info, it's great for giving you information about this computer. I can export it, that's good, because that means I don't have to copy it down by hand, obviously. But can I sit at my computer and get all the information of all the computers on my network in one go? If I can't do that, does that make it really applicable to a situation like TFSA? Probably no. But what about a smaller situation like Airfix Confectionery? Maybe, I don't know. So that's where you are saying, would you recommend it? What does it do poorly? Okay. So use your own judgment. So with one of these, you have to show me using it, and you have to explain, understand it enough to explain what's happening with it. Okay. So it's not going to be super difficult. I might ask you a question or two, but it's not going to be super difficult. Okay. But again, this is you giving advice to your client. With the backup, again, you probably did a backup strategy for your 5ICW, but you notice that some of this is going to be the same. So you can take that, put it straight in here if you wanted to, but there will be things which are different. For example, how will you protect company from ransomware if your backups are encrypted as well? Think about that, okay? So backup medium, so what are you going to use? So obviously that we did that last time, but now you have to compare two on-site, two off-site. So one on-site could be hardware. One on-site, another on-site could be the different types of hardware, but off-site could be just you putting hardware off-site on a different site, or could be the cloud, couldn't it? So it doesn't have to be you don't have to own the site or control the site. This off-site just means not at your physical site, because the whole point of it is so that if your whole site burns down, you don't lose all your backups as well. The backup software to be used, so that's again from previously. And now you have to discuss the difference between copy backup, differential backup, and full backup, and incremental backup. Bit of research, that's fairly straightforward. And then you have to configure MS Backup to backup Active Directory and the shared folders, okay, every day at 3 a.m. and store it on the file server. So it's very similar, except that it's not just Active Directory, it's those shared folders as well. And demonstrate The only other difference is that you have to demonstrate a deletion and restoration. So what will happen is once you've successfully backed up, you'll show me, I'll tick you off for the backup, and I will then delete something out of somewhere. It'll be probably different for everyone, but then you have to restore it. Okay, and capture the restore message and evidence and put in here, okay? Yeah, question? No, of course I'll tell you. I'll delete it right in front of you. It's just that for you, it might be this thing. For someone else, it might be something else, okay? I'll show you. You'll be watching me delete it. Okay, you'll be going, no, don't delete that, but I will. All right? So antivirus malware. So part of this subject is all about security and securing computers. Obviously, one of the ways to do that is to secure it from malware. So research a antivirus for this company that has to work on server and Windows 10. I don't want two different ones. I just want the one. Okay, I don't want this one for servers, this other one for workstations. I want one that works for both. Okay, briefly explain it, the pricing and the licensing. Is there a site license? What's going on here? Is there a site license? Yeah, it seems like the tabs were really off, isn't it? Yeah, I don't know. I thought this looked okay when I created it, but does the antivirus include monitoring software or firewall? So you know that some has built-in firewall and activity monitoring. Like if you go to a certain website, they'll stop you because that website's got bad reputation or something like that. So if it does, then tell me about it. And with one of them, with your antivirus, install it and show me it working. Explaining a few things. It's not very. It's pretty basic. And this is not right. Why did I put no longer? Same. Yeah, it is Elizabeth Downs. Yeah. Oh, of course. But obviously very close to each other. And if you were just working for this company, it's not like one in Elizabeth and one Elizabeth Downs. So I might just say Elizabeth and you'll know which one I mean. But no longer is definitely wrong. Totally wrong direction, okay? So basically configure DFS. If you don't know what that is, we're going to learn about it, distributed file system, and that's what we're going to use to synchronize the file system between the two file servers. We'll also implement a quota, but this time we're going to learn about file resource manager. We'll implement a quota of 500 megs as a warning, and 600 megs as the final cutoff. We'll be running a storage report to show the usage of people and how close they are from their quota. We'll be configuring a file screen that would prevent our users from storing files with these extensions. Obviously, we've got a file server. We don't want people to use it to share their movies and music, right? So that's just an example of that. Encrypted file system and auditing. So we spoke about the AAA security, authentication, authorization, and auditing or accounting. So we're going to create a new folder called commercially sensitive. We're going to have only the administrator with full access. And then we're going to encrypt this folder so with EFS. So even if the hard drive was stolen, the whole server was stolen, that someone can't just read it. Configure auditing so we can actually keep track of who's accessing it, who can access it, who can't access it, even if they try to access it and they're getting denied permission. I'd like to know who's been trying it. Okay. Configure auditing to capture log on failures and success. Create some events and capture, and will be captured by the auditing and show me. Then services. Remember we said that there's going to be a RODC who's going to be a DNS for your Elizabeth site as well, and it's going to be forwarded to that. We should know all about that. That's your Google DNS server, and we'll configure the Adelaide RAS and Elizabeth RAS to allow clients to go onto the internet. So basically, it'll become the gateway for the internal networks to go to the internet. But they will also allow remote users to actually dial in through VPN while they're on the road. And we'll also need to have site-to-site VPN between the Adelaide and Elizabeth sites. And we also will make the Adelaide RAS into a web server. hosting 2 sites, one which is a public site anyone can access, one which is a private site which requires authentication and is going to be secured by HTTPS. And if some of this is actually scaring you, don't forget we're going to learn how to do a lot of these, all of these things. Okay, there will be nothing in here that you'll be asked to do that you won't have learned through a worksheet or session. Then the firewall, configuring some firewalls to allow these traffic but deny other traffic. Network monitoring, going to this website, using free tools, filling out this table with it, and then demonstrating one of them. Okay, and then this is a test plan. Okay, what does that mean? That means like how are you gonna if you had six people working on your team and you tell Bob to go test the functionality of these things, well, firstly, he has to know what it is if he doesn't already, and it must be a consistent way of testing, isn't it? So if he tests it, and someone else runs the same test functionality as well, they should be doing it the same way. So the test protocol is the method of how would you test a fine-grained password policy. What do you expect to see? Did you see it? Did you get what you expected to see? Did it pass the test? Okay, so basically go through and do that. Some short answers to fill in. Okay, using the ping utility, test for internet access on the what's Adelaide RAS. What is the ping time? That's basically the time it takes to reply. If you know that, it's usually expressed in milliseconds. Very easy, just record the answers. If the acceptable ping time is 21 seconds, how much better or worse are your results from that 21 milliseconds? So let me just quickly demonstrate this. Okay, so if I had to ping www.facebook.com, and that's going to be very quick, isn't it? Look at that, that is 19, but that is 42. But you can see that's an odd one out, really, isn't it? So my answer to that is it's 19, and it's about 2 milliseconds better than the acceptable one, isn't it? Okay, so that's easy. So basically, why are we even having that? Because obviously there's going to be numeracy elements, isn't there? Always have to do a bit of working out. Same with this. Remember back in 5ICW, we use Resource Manager. We go to Performance. We use Resource Monitor. We go to Memory, and we look at free memory is 5.7 gigs. If how much free memory is it? To comply with best practice, 85% of it should be free. Well, let's say that doesn't quite look like 85%, is it? So I'm not saying go fix it necessarily. How much is it out? And obviously, if these are virtual machines, what do you do to fix it? Sorry, say that again. Download more. What did you say? Add more RAM to the virtual machines. Okay, add more RAM. So what adjustments could you do? Because they're virtual machines, very easy. Add more RAM to the virtual hardware. If they're physical machines, it's a little bit harder, but you could just upgrade RAM. Okay, and do it. Okay, same with this space. And then some user documentation. So basically just create, so this is the requirements for user documentation. Basically create a separate document that teaches someone to do the golden master technique. Okay, so deploy a new server from a golden master technique at the domain controller. Create a separate document for the boot up process, and another one for the configuration of a VPN client to dial in. Okay, they're all three are very short, but they must follow those standards. Okay, and the completion report, we've done this in the 5ICW as well. It's pretty much fill in the table and basically communicate with your stakeholder, and then clean up again what do you have to clean up. Okay, so don't leave your files on the computer. Okay, so that's what's required for this one. It's a lengthy one, you can see, and I said that from the start of the assessments, this is the one that people struggle with. This is the one that people either pass or fail on. The other two, usually people pass if they get to it and do it. This is the one people either pass the subject on or fail the subject on. So the easiest way to do it is to make sure you're always working on it, as in come to every class, have things checked off on a regular basis, and you'll see that here there's a checklist. Okay, this checklist is not 100% up to date. I have to add a few things and remove a few other things. But if you look at the progress, you'll see that every one of us, I'm going to just use you, Joseph, today. Sorry, I clicked on the wrong thing. So you can see that you have nothing checked off at this moment. But hopefully by the end of today, you would have your golden master created, all VMs cloned, subnet IP address done, VMs created with suitable hardware, the servers named correctly, and potentially your domain name and so forth named correctly. And once I click save, and now I'm putting you under pressure, you got to get these things ticked off now because I've saved it, Joseph. You see, you got a progress, don't you? You got a little bit of progress. You can always check this progress, okay? You know how you're going, and as you don't have to get everything checked off at the end. In fact, if you're planning to get everything checked off on the last day, you're just going to kill me if everyone does it. Okay, I'm going to literally die from checking everyone's work. So what my aim is to help me help you is to actually check you off along the way. If you get something ticked off, you know you've done it. If all else goes to hell because your virtual machine exploded or your hard drive exploded, you don't have to go back and do all those things you got ticked off. You just have to get the other things ticked off, and we'll find a sort of a happy medium of what you have to do to get to that stage. But if you have nothing ticked off, first of all, how do you know you even got it right? How do you even know you got it right? You might assume I've got everything right because I'm a very confident person and I've got everything right. But when I go to check it, maybe you just haven't done it right. Okay, of course I'll try to explain why you're not right, but I'm not going to show you how to fix it though. Okay, that's what the worksheets and the sessions are for. Shows you how to do it. I can tell you it's not right, I can tell you why it's not right, but you have to fix it, just like a real job. So I'm not going to talk about the Golden Master right now because I think you all know it. And secondly, there is a how to make a Golden Master video I've already previously made. And basically what it is just make a virtual machine, define the virtual hardware according to what's common with all of them, install the operating system, install the VMware tools, run sysprep and tell it to shut down. After it shuts down by itself, create a snapshot at that point, not after, not before, because at that point it hasn't generated the new SID, new name yet. But if you wait for it to restart and finish the sysprep and go through the OOBE, the out-of-the-box experience, it would have a new SID already. And if you if you clone at that stage, they're just going to all have that new SID, aren't they? Not a different one, just that new one. So you want to capture at that point where it shuts down by itself, but it hasn't gone through the OOBE yet when it restarts again. And therefore, when you clone, you create a snapshot called Golden Master, and you create a clone, and each clone is going to finish the setup OOBE and get a new SID. And if you remember, we used that sysprep. Yeah, of course, we said that. But if you remember, we got that PS Get SID tool to check the SIDs, confirm. So when I come around, when you call me, come around to check your Golden Master, make sure you have at least 2 clones running and PS Get SID displayed, so I know you can see the SID straight away. Okay. So that's what we want to do. And obviously the other rule with the Golden Master is that because all of these are linked clones and because they're going to save you so much space and all that kind of stuff, they're all relying on the Golden Master files. Okay, so if you mess up the Golden Master, you're going to affect all your clones. Okay, so what the other rule of Golden Master is that after you've got your Golden Master created and snapshotted, you do not turn it on anymore. Okay, it stays off. The less you touch it, the less chance it's going to be wrecked. Okay, so you only turn on new clones, and let's say you've totally made a mess of your domain controller. No big deal. Delete it. Create a new clone. Do it again. Very quick. Okay, but if you mess up the Golden Master, it might mean all of your work is relying on that is gone. All right, so I'll leave it there, and what I want you to do now is actually create this Golden Master and create the clones. One last word on the clones and the virtual machines. We spoke about a naming convention, didn't we, in the previous subject? If you haven't noticed, there's a naming convention. Okay, that means these computers, the NetBIOS name will be that, and the XX is your initials, and it's followed by the three-letter code for site, then the code for the code for the major function of that server. So what does that mean? It means that besides calling it by that for the computer name, you must also make sure the virtual machine is actually named that. You see how that's there, that's named? There's no confusion between, if you call it server 1, server 2, it's very hard to understand, isn't it? But if you see that that's AZADLRWDC, then you know that's the machine, isn't it? If you look at the tabs up here, you can see that they're named correctly, so you know which one you're on. So even though it sounds petty, but I must insist that you are using these naming conventions. To be honest, if you're working within a team and our company policy is to do this and you just don't follow it, guess what's going to happen? They're not going to keep you on the team for very long, are they? So this is like working within a team and walking to organizational policies. Yep. Yeah, call it Golden Master. Okay, and make the snapshot called Golden Master. And don't forget, you only need one snapshot on the Golden Master. You don't need 6 because you're creating 6 clones. Okay, so do not clone the current state. Clone the snapshot. Okay, that's something that people do all the time. Yeah, so that's that. So we'll get started working on that. And if you're really unsure about the Golden Master, go watch that video. Put your earphones on and watch that video.